My eyes couldn't focus for quite a few seconds after I opened them. My vision cleared, and simultaneously an acute shot of pain in my jaws made me squint hard. As I slowly came to my senses, I could feel the pain surge through my body. It felt like finding things about yourself that you never knew existed. It took me a minute to realize that I was lying by the road in the night. What time was it even? The cold was unforgiving. I had my jacket on, but my legs were frozen. Should not have worn a skirt, they were a little short for me. I was covered in dust, which made me wonder how long I'd been lying there. Wait, where was I? How did I get here? Wait, who was I? I couldn't remember my own name. I checked my head for any injury, but I looked fine. Then how did this happen? Drugs? Benzodiazepines? How did I know that word? I checked my arms for punctures. Nothing. Oral dosage? Probably. Was I an addict, or was this done to me? I stood up and looked at my body. I was young, but not too young. I checked my pockets, almost sure I wouldn't find anything. I was wrong. I had a tiny purse in it. There was very little money, some coins, and a parking ticket. October 16, 1994, New York. So was I a 20-something woman from New York who knew about benzodiazepines but not her own name? Great. I turned the ticket over and found a number scribbled on it. Bingo. I walked out of the bushes onto the road. The highway seemed dead. Not a single vehicle in New York? How was that possible? I started walking and I saw lights in the distance. Looked like a convenience store. It probably was. I quickened my pace, pulling my jacket into a tighter hug as the pain threatened to break me into pieces. I reached the store and considered if I should enter it. I decided I needed to drink something at least. I walked in and saw an old woman behind the counter. I greeted her. She looked up and stared at me as horror crept into her face. "Can I use the restroom?" I asked. She just gaped at me. This was getting suspicious. "I'll buy water and some food," I smiled. "Not for free." She just pointed her wrinkly finger towards the back of the store, visibly shaking. I rushed into the room, locked myself in, and threw a glance towards the mirror. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't my face. Whose face was this? I thought to myself. But I had a stitch mark as if there was a cut on my face. I had no idea whose face was I looking at. I checked the rest of my body and I looked fine. God, what am I? I got splashed some water in my face and walked out trying to look at the old woman. I walked into an aisle and picked up some water, some painkillers, and a scarf. I paid her and I asked her without making eye contact, "How far is New York City?" 8 kilometers. "Why is the highway so deserted?" "The government declared an emergency." "What for?" "They are busting drug rackets. They've arrested a bunch of dealers. Gang wars and killings are all over the city." "Alright." I started walking towards the door when I heard her croak, "What happened to you?" Without turning, I said, "Insect bite," and walked away. I exited the store and saw a phone booth right outside. I pulled out the ticket with the number and I entered the booth. I dialed the number slowly. I also memorized it just in case. The ringing began. I awaited, excited. I was finally going to find some answers now. "Hello," said a voice in British accent. I said nothing. "Who is this?" I had no idea what to say. "Who the hell is this?" Then I said the only word that I knew that night. Benzodiazepine. There were many types of benzodiazepines or benzos. It was a long shot. But how did I know all this? All I heard was silence from the other side. A truck passed by. "Where are you?" "I have no idea." "I'm sorry all of this went wrong. What do I do now?" There was more silence. He didn't know how to help me. "Listen, get back to base and we'll figure this out." I've got to go now. They're hunting us down. Wait! All I heard was a click. I walked out, frustrated. Who's hunting us down, and why? It suddenly struck me the old lady's words. They are busting rackets, arresting dealers. I don't like where this was going. I ran back into the store. I heard police sirens. I looked back and saw 3 police cars speed past me. I remembered the truck that passed by while I was in the booth. An emergency had been declared. What was that truck doing outside? I entered the store and saw the old lady was staring at the television screen. A story on the drug racket was being broadcast. A plastic surgeon had been arrested for apparently helping criminals change their appearances and identities. "Turn it off," I said. I now remembered. I remembered who I was, what I was. Changed appearance, drug-induced amnesia. I was trying to close a chapter of my life that would destroy me, but it clung to me like a sickness. She looked at me scared but didn't turn off the television. The next story was being broadcast now. The police had found the corpse of a teenage girl on the outskirts of New York City. Her clothes were missing. She was last seen wearing a brown jacket and a black skirt. Her scared little eyes moved down my body, looked at my brown jacket and my black skirt that were too short for me. It wasn't particularly fun at this part, but sometimes some things have to be done. Never leave a trace. First rule I learned in the drug business. I picked up a butcher's knife from the stand and looked her in the eye. "I'm sorry," I bowed. She opened her mouth to scream, but it never left her throat. I looked back at her, lying in a pool of blood, and quickly turned away. I had to get back to base. I had business to take care of.
Have you ever been so worked up or stressed out, having issues at home as well as at work? A lot going on in your mind, and all you can do to help yourself is to just go for a walk to cool off. Well, it happens with me sometimes. When there's anything troubling me, I usually take a walk in the woods, and then once I feel better, I come back and sort things out for myself. It was during the exams of my final graduation year, and though I was prepared with my studies, I was stressed about it. It was winter season. A day before my exams were to start, I decided to go for a walk in the woods and let the cool winds ease me. As I walked into the woods, I looked back and I could see my footprints in the snow, as the ground was all covered in snow. It just looked beautiful. I kept walking, not fast but in a normal strolling pace. It was cold, but my sweater kept me warm. As I walked deeper in the woods, it got colder, and I considered walking back home. Suddenly, I looked around and spotted a trap to catch an animal. The woods were very beautiful and home to many animals and birds. I had to destroy the trap so no animal could be caught in it. I had to be quick because whoever set the trap, he would be pretty mad at me for destroying his plan to hunt. I rushed towards the trap and destroyed it as fast as I could. I quickly turned back and walked away from there so I don't get caught by the hunter. I decided to go home, and as I walked back, I was following the same way I came through, but it felt a little new. I noticed my footprints had been erased. What? Has someone been following me the whole time? For the footprints to disappear like this, either a strong wind had blown, which covered it, or someone erased it on purpose. Now I was very confused. I stood there for over 5 minutes thinking about what to do next. Why would someone follow me? Why would anyone cover my tracks? I could resonate the scene to what I saw in one of the movies. That's what a serial killer would do if he didn't want others to locate his victim. Wait, am I being followed by a serial killer? No, it can't be. These are just some bad thoughts, I told myself. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. I jumped in fear to the vibration of my own phone. There was fear all over my face. Even an ant would scare me at that moment. I checked my phone and there was a message. But not just any message. It was a message from an unknown number. It was a picture of me. A picture of me when I was sitting and destroying the trap. Wow. So I was being watched. Now I was so afraid. Was I being watched? Or was I being followed right from my home? There was no time to think, and I turned in the other direction and I ran towards getting out of the woods. I ran so fast. While running, I didn't realize in which direction I was heading to. I didn't know if I was being chased or not, but I just kept running. At last, I sighted a cabin in the woods. I ran towards it, hoping I would knock and find someone living there so I could get some help. The cabin looked so old and shabby and creepy, but I was really scared and I needed help, at least someone to be with and know that I'm not alone. As I ran towards the cabin, the door opened like it was expecting me to run straight inside. I immediately stopped suddenly on a high speed, landed me on the ground. But I immediately stood up and ran towards another direction. All my brain told me at that moment was going into that cabin is a bad idea. I kept running and running. I was so tired and afraid. My heart was racing fast. I still didn't know whether I was being chased or followed or what. But I was afraid because I could sense something was very wrong, and someone out there was scaring the crap out of me. While running, I heard some movement coming towards me from behind. I immediately dashed forward out of fear. But unfortunately, I ran into a big tree in front of me. Colliding with a tree knocked me out totally. Now I was on the ground, helpless and open to any harm or danger. While on the ground, my eyes were so heavy, but I could hear someone walking towards me and seeing him standing over me and watching me. But my eyes had become so weak that I couldn't see his face at all. Next, I woke up and found myself in the hospital. "You are awake?" asked the doctor. He smiled and said, "I hit my head real bad. You shouldn't be out in the woods all by yourself, you know. It can be dangerous," he said. I asked him who brought me and how did I get in here. He replied he didn't know what had happened and that I was found at the roadside and some police officers brought me to the hospital. They also had no idea about how I reached the roadside, whereas I remember going unconscious in the woods. But they were down the hallway waiting for me so I could be questioned, at least to know what was going on. I was happy I was safe, and right now the police were the saviors I needed because everything happened to me, from the chase to the bleak glimpse of the mysterious person and how I got to the hospital, was so unclear. I needed answers to all of it, or at least someone who could help me find answers. Hi, today I'm going to tell you a story that I heard from my mom. This story is about her aunt who encountered a spirit. I was very small back then, and since my mom's mother died when my mom was young, I used to call her Grandma. Strange but true. Sometimes things like dolls, paintings, jewelry, etc. become haunted objects after a paranormal activity surrounding it. Anyways, let's move towards the story. It was the year 1980. Grandma had moved into a new home. After setting up the house, she went for a walk across the street to explore the vicinity. On her way, she saw a store that sold antique products. Grandma was very fond of antiques and wanted to have one in her new home. She entered the store and found antiques with year-old intricate work, beautiful paintings by famous painters, and furniture that was not easily available during her times. She started looking around for what could she buy and finally came across a painting. It was a painting of a beautiful scenery by a well-renowned painter of the ancient times. She bought the painting and headed home. She hung the painting on the wall of her living room, and it surely did increase the beauty of her house. A few days later, she invited her best friend, Melanie, for dinner and to see her new home. When Melanie came to visit Grandma, she was in awe of the painting. She loved it so much that she asked Grandma to buy one for her too, if she found one in the store any time she visited, and she would pay her for it. Grandma told her it was an antique and only one such painting was available. They had a good evening together, and after dinner, Melanie left. While Grandma was heading to sleep, she looked at the painting and an idea struck her. She decided to get a copy of this painting made by a painter and gift it to her friend. What if she can't have the same? She can at least have the copy if she liked it so much, Grandma thought to herself. The next morning, she hired a painter to draw a similar one. He came home and took the painting and said he would complete the work in a week. 2 days later, it so happened that the painter died in an accident. His assistant came to Grandma's house to return her the painting. After that, she hired another painter for the same job. The very next day, the painter returned the painting to Grandma and said that he can't work on the painting. On asking the reason behind the refusal, he said that he encountered a spirit that prevented him from completing the painting. What rubbish, Grandma thought. He then narrated the whole incident. He said that it was 11 o'clock last night when he started the painting of the scenery, and every time while putting the paintbrush on the canvas, he felt a hand tightly holding his wrist. He first took it as a false notion and went outside for a fag. But after returning, when he tried to paint, he again felt the same thing. He said that he clearly saw the shadow of a man with long hair. He got so scared and stopped painting. Grandma took it as a nuisance but said nothing to that painter. She gave the job to 2 other painters after that, and they also returned it back to her, saying that they had faced a similar incident. One of them faced it during daytime. Grandma was shocked and couldn't believe what was happening. That night, out of curiosity, she decided to work on the painting herself. She was not a painter or anything, but she thought of trying, just to see what happens. Now, what happened next was a big shock to Grandma. She encountered the spirit when she made an attempt to put the paintbrush dipped in paint on the canvas. She exactly felt the same thing like the other 3 painters, and also saw the shadow. After seeing the shadow, she was sure that it was the spirit of the first painter who died in an accident, as he had long hair. She fell ill after that incident. Doctors were unable to cure her. Finally, a relative visited a person who's an expert in paranormal activities, and he helped her in getting cured. After recovering, she said that when the first painter was given the job, he appreciated the painting so much and happily said that he would have never let any other painter do the job. So, it was obvious that his spirit prevented other painters from completing the task. Hi, my name is Leo, and today I want to share the weirdest and scariest experience of my life. I live with my parents in the city. My grad school is just a few minutes walking distance from my apartment. I walk down to school with my friend Nick, who lives close by. We usually take the same route home, through the not-so-busy roads around which only a few people live. One evening, while Nick and me were walking back home from school, a stranger walked up to us and said he needed help. We asked him what was the matter, but turned out he had just come to beg for money. He told us he wanted money to feed his family. We ignored him and walked away in the direction of our homes. The next day, while we were returning home from school via the same route, we saw a crowd gathered on the roadside. It was at the same place where we had met the beggar the previous evening. We went to check what was going on. It so happened that a poor man had committed suicide along with his family. Nobody knew the reason why he had done so. Some said he didn't have money to feed his family, and that made him take such a grave step. It was the same man who came to us asking for money. Nick and me looked at each other, and we were full of guilt. We were sad. However, we walked back home. That night, after dinner, I went to Nick's place. I wasn't feeling too good. It was a weird feeling. I was constantly thinking about that beggar and what had happened. His thoughts were haunting me. So I decided to discuss this with Nick, as that would have made me feel better. When I got there, I told him what I was going through, and I wasn't surprised when he told me that he felt the same way. So we decided to divert our minds and play some video games. We played for hours and realized it was too late. I had to get back home, and Nick had to go to bed. It was 12 midnight when I came home. I got to my room and slid into my bed. After a while, the doorbell rang. I sat up at once. I called out my mother and father. None of them responded. The doorbell rang again. Suddenly, a deep voice came from within me. It can be him, the beggar whom I saw, who wanted help from me. As I started walking down the stairs, the doorbell rang the third time. I peeped through the window to see who it was. It was the beggar who died that day. I was taken aback, shocked. I was very frightened to open the door. I stood there thinking what to do. After a few minutes, when I couldn't hear a sound, I peeped through the window again. This time I saw the beggar with the family. I was even more scared. They were dead. How could they be at my doorstep? I wondered. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door. I gathered the courage and walked up to open the door. As I opened the door, there was no one, but only a letter on the doormat. I picked the letter, and as I was opening it, the phone rang. I shut the door, and on my way towards the phone, I again saw the beggar with his family staring at me through the window. He had a paper in his hand which read, "Help." I ran away from there and picked the phone. A man answered from the other end. "Help him, and you would be safe, or else." And the phone hung up. I thought if this was a prank by a friend, and if I was thinking too much about the beggar. But I was pretty terrified about what was going on. I opened the letter, which I picked from the doormat. It had an address printed on it. 356A Beckler Street, North End, Mexico. I thought to myself, what if he was not really dead and he had come to ask for help again? So I took some money from my wallet and was going to give it to the beggar. I walked to the window, but there was no one. Now I was curious to know what was happening, even though I was scared. So I took out my bike to get to the address on the letter. I checked the time in my watch. It was 2 o'clock in the night. I thought of calling Nick, but then changed my mind, as I didn't want to call him this late. The weather was cool and pleasant. As I reached the address, I found that the house was small. It looked mysterious and spooky from the outside. I knocked at the door. No one answered. I pushed the door a little and realized it was open. As I moved inside to check if anyone was there, the lights were switched on at once and all sung, "Happy Birthday!" All my family members and friends gave me a big surprise. Nick was also there. I was amazed. At once, I felt a sigh of relief that the spooky-looking house was my birthday surprise place. I was so terrified after all that had happened that I had totally forgotten it was my birthday. But now I was in a comfort zone. After the cake cutting, while we were enjoying the delicious snacks, I asked my friends, why did they call and scare off me? They laughed at me and said, they never called. They just kept the letter with the address on the doormat, rang the doorbell 3 times and left. This kind of left me petrified. I went into a deep thought as to was it really the beggar and his family, or was it my illusion? Who knocked on the door? And who was the person who called me and asked me to help them and then hung up? I took Nick to a corner and told him all that had happened, but he had no clue either. Though I was happy about my family and friends giving me such a nice birthday surprise, this scary incident had left me with unanswered questions. The next day, I went to the place where the beggar lived, but there was nobody there. Just an old, half-broken hut with old, wrecked furniture. I tried tracking the phone call I received that night, but there were no records. And to this day, I've not been able to figure out how it all happened and who called.
Hi, I'm Vanessa. I'm not much into spirits and ghosts, so you can't say this will be a gothic story or a horror story, even when it is a real-life story. The incident I'm about to tell you today changed the way I think about spirits and ghosts. This incident happened after I shifted to my new apartment in New York City. I was excited. I unpacked all my stuff that morning, took some rest, and in the evening, I went out to meet a few friends who had been living in New York. It was a nice, fun evening, and I had a good time having dinner with my old friends. It was past midnight when I returned home, and when I entered home, I noticed a note fall off my door while shutting it. It read, "You need to be careful." I found it odd, but I was scared. I checked if all the windows and doors of my house were properly locked, and I went to sleep. That night, I felt a very cold breeze around me, even when the windows were shut, but I ignored it and went back to sleep. The next day, I got up and saw a mark on my wrist, a burn mark. I took some ice out of the fridge and rubbed it on my wrist for 5 to 10 minutes. I felt like someone was holding my wrist so tightly that my wrist became all red. So I thought maybe go see a nearby doctor. The doctor saw the wound and gave me a gel to apply on it, and said that it'll be fine in some days. When I got back to my apartment, there was a note laying in front of the door and it read, "We are coming." I was shocked and ran inside my house. There were weird things happening. I was terrified. I passed the next day thinking what all this was about, and why was it all happening with me. Around 11:30 p.m., somebody knocked on my door. I wondered who that would be as no one really knew the address I had moved to. I could see a shadow from the gap between the door and the floor, and that scared me even more. So I tried calling my parents, but they were not picking my calls or replying to any of my messages. I kept trying, and the person outside kept knocking. Finally, with great courage, I decided to open the door. It was my parents. I felt relieved and hugged them. I welcomed them inside my house and made them sit on the sofa. After a while, someone knocked on the door again. This time, I wasn't scared because my parents were with me. When I opened the door, there were 2 policemen standing and asked if I was Miss Vanessa. I said, "Yes, I'm Vanessa, but what's the matter?" One of the policemen in a deep voice said, "Sorry, ma'am, but your parents died in a car crash 2 days back, and these are their phone and your father's wallet. You might have to come to the police station with us." I said to the policeman, "No, sir, this might be wrong information, because my parents are here with me." And as I turned around, opening the door fully to let the policeman see my parents, there was nobody on the sofa. There was only a note which read, "We are home." I was horrified with what happened, but I had to go with the policeman and complete all the formalities. I came home and cried a lot that night. Now, I have a normal life and I have moved on, but I always have a question in my mind. If my parents were really there that day,
James was in his early 30s, tall, handsome, with strong classic features and thick black hair. After 3 years in the business, his private detective agency had a good reputation in the city. He was single and in love. The only drawback here was that he was in love with a married woman. One usual day in office, James was sitting in his cabin, sipping on coffee and reading the newspaper. Somebody knocked at the door. "Come in," he said, keeping his cup of coffee on the table. A slender, middle-aged man with thin hair and rimless glasses, dressed in an expensive suit, opened the door and walked in. James got up from behind his desk and shook the newcomer's hand. "Please, sit down. I'm James, director of the agency. What can I do for you?" he said with a half-anxious expression, which he had practiced in the mirror many times. "My name is Henry Roberts," he spoke in a low voice. "You have been highly recommended to me. I have a very sensitive matter to discuss, and I've heard your agency is very discreet." James acknowledged the words with a modest wave of his hand and asked him what did he need help with. Henry explained, "I suspect my wife is cheating on me, but I want to be sure. I want you to investigate. Follow her when she leaves our apartment and let me know where she goes and who she sees." James said, "We can give you a complete and detailed report. When would you like it?" "I guess 2 weeks will be good enough, unless you think you should follow her longer," said Henry. James agreed, saying 2 weeks may be okay. Henry handed over his card to James, which had his address. Along with that, he also gave an envelope with his wife's picture and a check for the advance payment. Henry already knew the rates of James's agency. "What is your wife's name?" asked James. "Sharon Roberts." James held his breath. Sharon Roberts was his lover's name. This man must be her husband, he thought to himself. He opened the envelope and looked at the picture and the check, hoping to gain time and recover his cool. Henry supposed his seriousness was a desire to start work on the job at once. "I see you're a man of few words. I'm sure you'll give me a thorough report next time I see you. Good day." James finally found his voice. "Good day, Mr. Henry," he said, getting up from his chair and walking his new client to the door. After Henry was gone, James sat down again at his desk. He was in a state of shock. He opened the lower right-hand drawer and took out a bottle of scotch and a glass. He poured himself a drink, and while sipping it, pondered how to handle this tricky situation. So his new client was Sharon's husband. Not much to look at, he thought. No wonder she wants to get a divorce and marry me. He knew he couldn't give this client a true report. Still, he had to make a report. He decided to give his operative, David, the job and to stay away from Sharon during the 2 weeks of the investigation. He would tell her about her husband's suspicions later, after he had delivered the report, and they would have a good laugh then. David was a young man who had recently started to work. 2 weeks later, David, eager and in love with his job, came into James's office. "I finished the Henry Roberts investigation. I'll have the report on your desk first thing tomorrow morning." "Great. Do me a favor now, will you? Call Mr. Henry and ask him to come to the office tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. "You got it. See you tomorrow," said David. But the next morning, when Henry walked into the office, David hadn't finished the report yet. "Good morning, Mr. Henry. Sit down. Would you like a cup of coffee?" said James, trying to gain some time until his operative brought in the report. "That would be nice. Thanks." James poured scalding hot coffee into 2 cups, placing the sugar and cream within Henry's reach. When they had started drinking the coffee, David walked into the office and after greeting Henry, gave a folder to his boss. Quickly, James took out the original copy and gave it to his client, keeping the duplicate copy face down in front of him. Henry read the report without a change of expression. When he finished, he looked at James directly and said, 3. "Beg your pardon?" James asked surprisingly. I was afraid of something like this. 3 of them in only 2 weeks. What are you talking about? Your report. It's really complete. It shows that she had 3 lovers in 2 weeks. James choked on his coffee, spilling some on the duplicate copy of the report in front of him. He exclaimed, "What? Oh, pardon me," and using the excuse of wiping the coffee from each page of the report, started reading it. When he had finished, he was stunned and felt weak. With an effort, he raised his eyes to the face of his client. Henry had a grin on his face. With a knowing look and subtly mocking tone, he said, "Don't you believe that there are some women you just can't trust?"
Another lazy Monday morning. How I hate Mondays! Exclaimed Dora as she woke from her beauty sleep, which was disturbed by the pesky alarm clock that lay beside her. For about 5 minutes, she stared at the window that provided a beautiful landscape. "How I wish I was inanimate just like the tree," said Dora as she slowly and steadily moved out of her bed. "I feel so tired. Should I skip work today?" Saying so, she checked the calendar which marked the date of the important meeting with the international clients. "Ah, good lord, the meeting is today. I must reach there early." Saying so, she opened her wardrobe and repeated the phrase which all girls do, "I have nothing to wear." After 5 minutes of scanning the clothes, she finally chose her white shirt and black trousers. She freshened up, quickly rolled her hair into a bun, wore white studs, packed all her stuff, and left the house. Dora's office was a 10-minute walk from her house. Just to describe her location, Dora lived in New York in a rental apartment. Her parents, Frank and Lucy Roberts, who stayed in Canada, would visit her often, and Dora would complain about her stressful life to them. They would advise her to remain calm and keep going. Hard workers always succeed. Mr. Roberts would say, "Your hard work today will ensure a beautiful future tomorrow." Coming to the present, Dora was sleepily walking on the street when she realized that the entire street was empty. Not a single person adorned the streets. However, she didn't think much about it and reached the office only to find it shut. She was left baffled. Why in the world is the office shut on a working day? Even if the sudden decision was taken, then why didn't my boss inform me? Thought Dora. Nevertheless, having no choice in hand, she decided to head back home. As she reached home, a note rested on the living room sofa. "I shall now enjoy your life," it said. Dora was confused as to what this meant. She threw the note in the trash and looked out of the window. She saw Joanna steadily approaching her apartment. Why would Joanna wish for a rendezvous with me? After all, she despises me so much. The doorbell rang. Dora didn't wish to open the door to her but still did, as she wanted answers to the weird things happening around. As soon as Dora opened the door, Joanna flung her arms around Dora and embraced her dearly. "How are you, Dora? I missed you so much. I just couldn't wait to see you, so I decided to make an impromptu visit. I hope you don't mind." Dora couldn't believe her eyes. Her mouth swung open in shock as she scrutinized Joanna. She was tongue-tied and her eyes seemed to have frozen on Joanna. "What's the matter, Dora? Are you okay?" inquired Joanna. Dora still couldn't answer as this wasn't possible. How could a girl who always played evil tricks on her suddenly transform into a well-wisher? Joanna gave her a nudge, which brought Dora to her senses. "Wouldn't you ask me to come in?" asked Joanna with a sweet smile. "Oh yes, certainly, but I hope you aren't here for executing your evil tricks," mocked Dora. "What? Why would I do that? After all, I'm your best friend. I'm here because I missed you," said Joanna. "This is so bizarre and uncanny," thought Dora. "By the way, why are the streets so isolated today? You sound as if you're new to this worldwide routine. Don't you know that Sunday is always a holiday? According to the calendar, today has to be Monday. How is it a Sunday today?" thought the confused Dora. Maybe it's actually a Sunday and I'm mistaken. What thoughts are you occupied with?" Nothing. Anyway, would you like to have something? Snacks or anything to drink?" questioned Dora, who held hospitality to the highest regard. "Yes, I'd love to." Dora brought some snacks, and the two enjoyed relishing them together. They chatted for quite a long time, and then Joanna took her leave. Dora felt quite special that day and assumed that maybe Joanna wished to give up on her enmity and start anew. The next morning, she received a text from an unknown number, reminding her of the important meeting with international clients. Since it flashed an unknown number on her phone, she texted back, "Sorry, may I know who this is?" The other side responded, "Are you dreaming, Dora? I am your boss. Hope you remember that you're working." Dora was flabbergasted. How is this possible? How didn't her boss number exist in her contact list? Anyway, considering the meeting, she didn't ponder much upon it and left. At the office, the meeting with clients was a huge success. She decided to approach her best friend Christine to share her happiness as she usually did. However, when she walked casually towards her, Christine ignored her. Dora wasn't expecting this. However, she caught up with her and inquired, "What's the problem, Christine? Why are you avoiding me? You're speaking to me as if I'm your dear friend. Have you forgotten we're enemies?" Dora could now figure things out. Everything was happening in the topsy-turvy way. It was as if Joanna impersonated Christine, whereas Christine transformed to Joanna. Dora also observed that her strict boss, who regularly discouraged her, had suddenly become amenable and understanding. Things had taken a reverse turn. Dora started to enjoy this life, which welcomed compassionate people, unlike her regular villainous life. Once at home, she was surprised by the presence of her parents, eagerly waiting for her. Dora rushed to hug her mother. However, Mr. Roberts didn't hug her back. Instead, she asked Dora to back off and stop behaving like a child. Dora couldn't believe this at all. "Mother would never speak to me like this," recollected Dora. Also, her dad wore a frowning expression and said, "We're here to inform you that if your performance in the office continues to remain poor, then do not rely on us on your expenses. You're no more a child." Dora was even more puzzled. "My performance in the office is way too good. I received multiple laurels to my credit. Why is my dad saying this?" thought Dora. Without waiting for a response, Dora's parents stormed out of the house without even giving her a farewell kiss. Her parents too had changed. Then she could put the pieces together. Maybe she was in a different world. Each of the people existing here had a doppelganger in another world. It could also be the reason that the phone numbers of her close ones and colleagues did not exist. Dora had heard about the parallel universe and assumed that probably she was part of it now. Since everything is happening the reverse way, this has to be the parallel universe. Then, she frantically searched for that note in the trash. When she got hold of it, she could understand the words in it carefully. "The author of this note is most probably my doppelganger, and currently she is in my world. What do I do now? How do I make things alright? I cannot have my parents and best friend treat me like this." "Wake up, Dora darling, you're getting late for work." Dora then slowly opened her eyes to find her mom by her bedside. Dora heaved a sigh of relief after acknowledging the fact that the entire episode was planned by her neurons. "Oh, what an unpleasant dream to have seen," sighed Dora. "Move out of your dreams, baby, and freshen up. I'll keep your breakfast ready," beamed Mrs. Roberts. Dora nodded in approval and shot out of the bed. As she was slipping on her flip-flops, she noticed a piece of paper near the lamp. She quickly unfolded it. It said, "You're lucky to have returned." This note blossomed the dire confusion in Dora's head. Was my trip to the parallel universe a dream or reality? To this day, the mystery remains unsolved. The mere thought of it haunts Dora, and she's regularly made it a routine to thank God for her safety. Clarissa was waiting for her daughter Rose to return home. Recently, Rose had started playing with an unknown kid at the riverside. That river was just a few yards away from their home. She told her mother that the stranger girl is now her new mysterious friend. Their home was located in the suburb at the edge of a small forest. Rose's father Harry was very fond of that home as he had spent most of his childhood there. And though it was far from the town, he decided to live there. When they moved into that home, Rose was a year-old kid, and after Rose, doctors told it was difficult for Clarissa to have another child, and so they started taking care of her with utmost care. When Rose turned 5, she realized that she wanted more friends to play with. There were no other homes anywhere close to hers, which meant no kids to play with. She felt very bored, a lot. I mean, imagine a kid not having friends to play with. Once in a while, Clarissa and Harry used to go to their friend's house in town to spend some time with their kids. But for Rose, that was not enough. Many times Clarissa had been asking Harry to move in town just for Rose, so she could find many friends there. But Harry kept postponing it every time. Meanwhile, Rose just got used to playing alone and spent a lot of time at the riverside. One day, Rose had come home happily and told Clarissa that she made a friend at the riverside. Clarissa was surprised because as far as she knew, there was no one living near their home, so there was no chance of anyone coming there to play. But when Rose described her friend, like how she talked and how she looked, Clarissa started believing that girl could be coming from a nearby village. As per her description, she was of the same age of Rose, and she came to meet Rose every day. But Clarissa was curious to know how a small girl was allowed to come alone from her village. She asked Rose to bring her home, but she refused and said that her friend didn't want to come. She told Rose that no one should see her, otherwise she wouldn't meet her again. After hearing that, Clarissa started suspecting her friend. She told Harry about Rose's mysterious friend, but he didn't care much about it. That day, Clarissa decided to find out about the girl at any cost. So she prepared Rose's favorite dessert to make her happy, so she could find more details about her friend. She was waiting for her to come back home, and she was home in no time. "Hi, sweetie, you know what I prepared for you? Can you guess?" "Hey, mommy, I know you prepared apple pie. I like it." She was very happy. Clarissa nodded and took her to the kitchen and gave Rose a piece of the apple pie. While she was eating, she asked, "Sweetie, does your friend also like apple pie?" "Yes, mommy," she said, gulping the dessert. "Why don't you give some to your friend? She might feel very happy." "Yeah, you're right, mommy. She'll be very happy, thank you." "Will you go now? Will your friend still be at the riverside?" Clarissa asked by looking at Rose carefully. "Yeah, mommy, she's always there. Even she doesn't have any friends. So I'll go and give her the apple pie right now," she said and left home. "Okay, come quickly and be careful, alright?" After a few seconds, Clarissa followed Rose, and she was extremely careful so that Rose wouldn't notice her. When she reached the bay, she was stunned on seeing what Rose was doing there. There was no one other than Rose at the riverside. She was talking all by herself and feeding the apple pie in the air. She was talking as if someone was sitting beside her. Clarissa rushed quickly and stood in front of Rose and shouted, "Sweetie, what you doing alone here?" Rose was startled on seeing her. "Mommy, why'd you come here? I told you not to come. See, my friend just left now." "Shut up, you don't have any friends here. You were talking to nobody." Rose had never seen her mother so furious and she started crying. "Enough, let's go home." Clarissa grabbed Rose's hand and took her home. When they reached home, Rose was still crying and went inside her bedroom and closed the door. Clarissa was terribly upset to see her kid talking alone. She waited for Harry to come home so she could tell him what happened. That is very common, baby. Kids sometimes behave like that. They make friendships with imaginary people, and they talk with them. So don't make it as a big issue. Take it easy," Harry said to her when she told him about what happened that day. She didn't expect Harry to take this so lightly, as she thought he would take her to a doctor for a checkup. "But honey, it's not normal for anyone to talk on their own. So can we have her taken to the hospital?" "I told you, take it easy. It's not a big deal, alright? I have to take a bath," he said and went to the bathroom. But Clarissa was not convinced at all. She wanted to keep a close eye on her daughter's actions. And her worries doubled when Rose one day told her that her friend had come to her bedroom to talk to her, as Clarissa was not allowing Rose to go to the riverside after that incident. "What'd she tell you?" Clarissa asked curiously. "She said she was very angry with you, as you're not allowing me to talk to her. She told me that she would kill you. But I pleaded her not to do that. She's not like before. She's changed so much. I'm afraid, Mommy." Clarissa's face turned pale and terrified upon hearing the word killing from a 5-year-old's mouth. She hugged Rose immediately and asked her not to worry. She tried to calm her, but on the inside she thought, why the hell was she talking like that? Now, Clarissa was strongly determined to take Rose to a doctor before the situation got worse. I don't understand what's the matter with you. You're not listening to me right now. We must take her to a doctor. She's behaving like a crazy girl. Today she said that her imaginary friend wanted to kill me. Do you want to wait until she turns totally mad? Calm down, Clarissa. Nothing is going to happen. Just wait for a few days. Everything is going to be alright. When? When will it happen? You don't want to change the house? You don't want to take her to a doctor? You don't want anything to get better? Why? I have to know today. No, we can't take her to any doctor. Because why? Why can't we take her to a doctor? Now I realize why. Because you don't like her. You didn't have any affection for her. Shut up! I didn't want to take her because there is no her. Rose is no more. Yes, our kid is dead. When we moved here, you took her to the river for a boat ride. But that day, the boat crashed into a big rock and flipped. Both of you fell in the river. You survived, but our Rose drowned to death. On saying this, he burst into tears. She was shocked and looked at him unbelievingly. After that incident, you didn't believe that she was no more. You started behaving as if she's still alive and playing with us. You constructed a dream world where our Rose lived with us and has grown up. It was you. You didn't want to change the home because if we moved to a different one, you might have recalled that Rose is no more. And you didn't want that. You wanted to live in your dream world and feel Rose's presence. But you don't understand how much torture I've been going through on seeing you like that. No, you're lying. Rose is alive. I can show you. She's sleeping. She's alive. Clarissa muttered and fell on the floor unconscious.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more videos.